The hatch command is used to fill in enclosed areas with either patterns, solid colors, or gradients. To access the hatch command, you can either type it into the word hatch into the command prompt or select the hatch tool from the draw bar. When I select the tool from the draw toolbar, the hatch command window comes up. Here I have several options. First thing I want to do is pick the pattern that I want to fill. If you want to fill it with a solid color, such as with the lake for the site plan project, you would select solid and probably change the color to blue. If I want to change the color back to the default black, I can select that. Then I can pick a pattern, say brick, and then I can pick an area, select add pick points for an area to fill. So notice it gives me a preview of what it's going to look like. If I want to change the size of the pattern that I fill the area with, I can change the scale of it, set it to 1, which is the default, which is pretty small. If I want to make it, change the size by making it smaller, I can set it to 0.1. You see the density of it changes. So depending on the pattern itself, you can experiment with this to get it to a realistic size. I can also change the angle. I can change the transparency of it so that it's semi-transparent to see through it. I have many options that I encourage you to explore. Once I've selected the region I want to fill, I hit enter, and then my hatch is complete, and then it disappears. If I want to edit the hatch again, I can highlight it just like an object, double click it, and then the hatch command comes back up, and once that window's back up, you can edit it, change the pattern to a different pattern, make it a solid color, etc. A couple of tips with the hatch command to pay attention to. I mentioned the scale to scale the size of the object. I talked about the colors. You can change the color of the hatch pattern itself. You can also set a background color. So for example, if I wanted this to be brick, I could use a red background with a white hatch pattern to make it look like red bricks with white grout lines. If you want to hatch multiple areas, it's advisable to do that in separate steps. The reason is, if I hatch all this in one command, say I add a pick point in here as well, and I hit enter, these are now associated with each other. In other words, if I edit this one will also update. That's good and bad. Good if you want them to stay together, but if you modify the geometry of this wall, it's going to mess up the hatch pattern on this side as well. So sometimes it's more beneficial to hatch this one first and then hatch this area afterwards. A simple way to get the properties to match from one hatch to the next is if I apply the hatch command to a different area, and say I use a different pattern on accident, and I fill this here, hit enter. Now what I can do is use the match properties command. So if I simply type in match prop comes up in the command prompt. I select the source object, say this brick pattern here, and then I click on the destination object. Now it automatically inherits those properties of that prior hatch pattern. The match prop command can be used for lines, circles, anything you want the properties to match from one object to another. If you ever want to edit this hatch pattern individually later as individual lines, you can always explode it into individual pieces. So if you click the explode command and select the hatch pattern, now it's been exploded into individual line segments. So if I click on this now, each of these pieces is an individual line segment. Now I can edit this just like a standard drawing. However, once you explode it, you can't just put it back to a hatch pattern. The only way you can do it is undo, but if you undo, you can only go back so many times. When you hatch, it's always a good idea to save first, particularly because the hatch command is a very memory-intensive operation. If you're ever trying to hatch a very, very large region, it might be beneficial to break it up into smaller regions by drawing lines or breaking it up into rectangles of which you hatch the smaller areas first, and then you can combine them to a larger area. If you select the hatch command and try and hatch an area that's not enclosed, you'll get this error message that looks something like this. It says the closed boundary cannot be determined. If you get that, make sure you hit close. If you proceed, you're going to freeze the computer because it's going to go into an endless loop. So that's another reason it's a good idea to save frequently before you do the hatch pattern, to avoid your computer freezing and losing your work.